You're staring at a spreadsheet that should not exist. The numbers don't balance. They don't misalign. They don't need review. They lie. $200 million moved through shell companies in Cyprus, Panama, and Nevada. It was layered, washed, dried, pressed. Perfect. Except it never touched real cash. Which means one thing. Someone created money out of thin air inside a criminal empire that executes people for rounding errors. And you're the one who signed off on it. You don't panic. That's rule 1. You adjust your cufflinks, zoom into 400%, and start tracing the bloodline of every dollar like it's DNA evidence at your own murder trial. Because in a cartel, accounting isn't math. It's survival. You weren't recruited. You were acquired. Top of your class. Dual degree in finance and data systems. Internship at a Big 4 firm. You understood regulatory arbitrage before you could legally drink. Then one client changed everything. A logistics conglomerate with aggressive expansion goals. Rapid cross-border liquidity needs. Political exposure. High volatility. Translation, cocaine with quarterly targets. They didn't threaten you. They impressed you. Private jet to Mexico City. Dinner in a glass tower. The boss, not some street thug but a strategist, explained margins like a venture capitalist pitching Series C. You move numbers, he said. We move product. Same game. Different inventory. You told yourself you weren't joining a cartel. You were optimizing cash flow for a misunderstood multinational. The salary was 7 figures. The bonus structure was violent. You said yes before dessert arrived. You rebuilt their entire financial architecture in 18 months. Shell corporations stacked like Russian dolls. Real estate in Miami, Madrid, and Dubai. Art auctions laundering 8 figures per brushstroke. Crypto mining farms in Kazakhstan. You didn't hide money. You weaponized it. The cartel stopped thinking like criminals and started thinking like a hedge fund with guns. Cash wasn't buried in oil drums anymore. It was leveraged. You introduced derivatives to narcotics. You created offshore lending arms that charged interest to your own distribution cells. You turned blood money into passive income. The boss started calling you professor. Politicians started shaking your hand without knowing why. You weren't just cleaning money. You were building an empire's nervous system. And empires don't function without a brain. Compromise. The first body didn't bother you. You didn't see it. You saw the expense report. Operational correction. It read. $300,000 in cleanup. Legal disbursement. Family settlement. You categorized it under risk mitigation. The second time you asked fewer questions. The third time you automated the process. That's how moral decay works. Not in screams. In spreadsheets. Soon you were forecasting violence like weather patterns. If revenue dipped in the southwest corridor, enforcement spending would rise 12%. If a rival encroached on port access, expect a capital expenditure in weaponry. You weren't reacting to brutality. You were budgeting for it. And here's the part that should scare you. It felt efficient. The cartel ran smoother under your models. Less chaos. More precision. You reduced random cruelty. You replaced it with strategic cruelty, which somehow felt professional. You told yourself you were minimizing damage. But all you really did was optimize it. Power. Access changes you. You weren't just balancing books anymore. You were advising strategy. Should the cartel diversify into synthetic opioids? You ran projections. Should they back a gubernatorial candidate? You calculated ROI on corruption. Should they eliminate a regional lieutenant getting too ambitious? You assessed leadership redundancy risk. Men with armies waited for your financial blessing before pulling triggers. Think about that. Gunfire paused for your Excel approval. You started flying private without being told. You negotiated directly with international bankers who suspected everything but proved nothing. You built relationships with compliance officers just to study their blind spots. You weren't scared of law enforcement. You were 10 steps ahead of them. The cartel boss still wore the crown. But you controlled the oxygen. And you knew it. Overreach. Power makes you curious. Curiosity makes you sloppy. That phantom $200 million? It started as an experiment. You wanted to test liquidity elasticity inside the laundering network. So you created synthetic transactions between shell companies. Fake invoices. Artificial loans. Ghost assets. Just to see if anyone would notice. They didn't. So you did it again. Then you realized something terrifying. You could create money internally, skim microscopic percentages across dozens of entities, and no one, not even the boss, would detect it. You told yourself it wasn't theft. It was a performance bonus. You weren't stealing from street dealers. You were siphoning from excess opacity. From rounding errors inside a billion-dollar machine. 5 million became 10. 10 became 50. Then you got ambitious. You engineered a $200 million illusion, funds that appeared diversified across international holdings but existed only as digital choreography. It was beautiful. A financial ghost. You planned to unwind it slowly over 2 years. No shockwaves. No suspicion. But you forgot one thing. Cartels don't collapse from audits. They collapse from paranoia. The boss didn't find the discrepancy. His son did. Young. Impulsive. Educated in London. Trying to prove he was more than inherited violence. He hired an external analytics firm to modernize oversight. Fresh eyes. Algorithms without loyalty. They flagged irregular transaction loops. Circular capital patterns. Liquidity that behaved like a hologram. You got the call at 2:13 a.m. Come to the house. Not the office. The house. You arrived to silence thick enough to suffocate. The sun is pacing. The boss is seated, calm as ever. Your laptop is already open on the table. That's when you realize something crucial. They don't fully understand what you did. They just know something is wrong. And in a cartel, wrong equals betrayal. You could confess. You could deny. Or you could do what you've always done. Control the narrative. You don't apologize. You present. You explain that the $200 million is part of a stress test architecture, designed to measure internal transparency weaknesses before rivals exploit them. You show projections, graphs, risk matrices. You turn theft into foresight. You frame yourself not as a traitor, but as a visionary protecting the empire from invisible threats. The sun looks uncertain. The boss watches you without blinking. Then he asks one question. If I remove you, does this system survive? There it is. Not anger. Not accusation. Cost-benefit analysis. You realize in that moment that you trained them too well. They're thinking like you now. Cold. Strategic. Replaceable components. You start explaining how complex the architecture is. How only you understand the full scope. How abrupt removal would destabilize offshore structures. Which is true. For about 6 months. The boss nods slowly. You mistake it for agreement. It's actually calculation. Downfall. They don't kill you. That would be emotional. They do something worse. They let you leave. With a severance package. Private flight. Offshore account access. A quiet retirement in Switzerland. You almost believe you won. Until 3 weeks later when international authorities freeze every account linked to your identity. Interpol issues a red notice. The analytics firm? It wasn't independent. It was cooperating with U.S. prosecutors. And your synthetic $200 million? It created a digital trail so complex it exposed the entire laundering ecosystem. You built a masterpiece of financial engineering. And in doing so, you documented every crime in forensic detail. The cartel survives. They pivot, adapt, sacrifice mid-level operators. But you? You become the architect prosecutors parade in court. The genius who turned a drug empire into a case study. Sitting alone in a holding cell, you finally understand the irony. You thought you were irreplaceable. But you were just another asset. High yield. High risk. Eventually liquidated. And here's the real lesson. In a criminal empire, the most dangerous man isn't the one with the gun. It's the one with the spreadsheet. Until the spreadsheet becomes evidence.